Right. So, man, I'm excited today. I'm a big fan of The Office. Maybe some of you are as well. There, as Jason has on his Dunder Mifflin sweatshirt, one of the episodes that has become one of the most famous episodes, but is also one of the most painful episodes, is the dinner party episode. Now, if you're familiar with the show, it's a horrifying episode. Like it's as hard as it gets to watch. There's this boss, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but there's this boss who is a really awkward boss, but he really loves his employees, but he's really awkward and just kind of weird. And he invites a couple couples to his house for a dinner party, and when they get there, everything goes wrong. Like everything goes horribly wrong in all the worst ways that you could imagine. And you end up in this episode, like your heart going out to these television actors and actresses who you're like, oh my gosh, I feel so bad that they even had to act in this scene. Like this isn't real, and I'm just heartbroken for them for what they're having to endure. Now, what's interesting about it is if you were to look up, opinions of the dinner party episode online, you'll find a range of opinions, but primarily between two poles. People who can't watch it and won't watch it because they feel like it's so cringy, or people who think it's the funniest episode of the entire series. Now, for the people who land in that camp, actually really for the people who land in either camp, I think what it stems from is a similar thing. We've all been there. Maybe not quite as bad as that was, although my guess is that for the people who go, I can't watch it, it's probably because they have been in situations as bad as that one. For people who haven't been in situations quite that bad, maybe they're able to tolerate it a little bit better. But in either case, the idea is that I think for people in both camps, there's this sense of like, oh yeah, been there, done that. Now, we've all been in situations like that. We've all been in situations where we've been in a context, we've been in a, maybe not a dinner party, but we've been in some social situation that's like, hey, I don't belong here. I shouldn't be here for whatever reason. Today we're continuing our series called One Another. And in this series, we've been walking through this biblical idea of one anothering one another. And so if you haven't been here, let me get you caught up real quick. This series comes from a Greek word, allelon. And this Greek word it means each other or one another. It's a pronoun, and it marks reciprocation between two persons. This word is used 94 times in the New Testament, and it's actually, there are other versions of this word that are used even more. It's used a lot. And whenever it's used, it is giving instructions. I shouldn't say whenever, most of the time that it's used to give instructions for how we should behave or act toward each other. And this was a big deal in the New Testament because at the time there was this new thing that was known as the Way. It was these groups of people who believed that Jesus was the Messiah, the Son of God. And so they were figuring out how to live as one group of people united under him. And so a lot of the uses in the New Testament are these really specific instructions about how to be in healthy relationships. And that's critical for us today because although we're 2,000 years out from those letters and those words, we aren't a whole lot better at relationships than they were. We're probably not any better at relationships than they were. And that gets really challenging in a church context because in a church context, we have a group of people that are united around one thing, but we're all still very, very different. Like we're very different. So I look around the room, I see some people that I know some of you really well, and some of you are a lot like me, and some of you are a whole lot not like me. Some of you, you understand me and the chaos that I can create sometimes. You're like, yeah, I like to live in that world. And other people are like, just organize something, just anything, just be planned. That's boring. Planning, boring. Limiting your options. And so as we get in then community with one another, what tends to happen in churches is there start to be these little rifts, these little divisions, these little things that happen. And all throughout the story of the Bible, we see that this is a repeated pattern. Satan, one of his greatest tactics, maybe his greatest tactic, is to try to weasel his way into relationships, to divide people. Because when he does, he can essentially kill the church's witness. And so all throughout this series, what we're doing is we're looking at how do we one another. How do we behave toward one another in a way that is consistent with the Bible and that builds up this incredible thing called the church that is supposed to be the hope and light of the world. That's the idea. That's where we've been. It's where we're going. And it's a long series because there's a lot of concepts that we're covering. But so far, we've covered 4 different things. We've covered that love is the foundation of a healthy church family. We've covered that when we love each other, we posture ourselves then with humility toward each other. We've covered that once we've postured ourselves with humility, we have to make a commitment to each other to endure through the easy times and in the hard times. And then last week, after we kind of laid that foundation, we started to talk about the actual behaviors. What does it look like in practice to one another? And the first thing that we talked about, I just went to grab my glasses, and I don't have glasses on, so that's super fun. Now it's down a whole rabbit hole. Once we have that foundation, now it's time to start building. And we have to build something strong. And we talked about how throughout the Bible, there's this idea or throughout the New Testament, there's this idea that encouragement is the way we build strength in the body. When we encourage one another. And one of the things that I talked about is a little bit of a side note, but I just want to point it out. I talked about how just being present is an important part of encouragement. It's hard to encourage each other when we're not face to face. Biblically, they were always face to face. But more than that, just seeing each other is an encouragement in a healthy church family. Seeing all of you today is an encouragement to my heart. Seeing people who haven't been here for a while is a deeply encouraging thing to my heart. And so simply being here in each other's presence is an encouragement. We're building strength in the body. But as we do that, something new starts to happen. Because we can't just be building strength in one specific context that is separated from other contexts. We can't just be building strength here when we're in this building. Because when we're in this building, it's not like our day-to-day lives. And one of the most important things about a healthy church family is not just that we encourage each other when we're together, but that we are an encouragement to each other when we're not. And also at the same time, one of the most important things in a church family is that we aren't content with who is currently around the table, but that there's always a chair pulled out, that we've made room for more. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to kind of deal with these 2 parallel truths that are encompassed and dealt with through one idea biblically. We're going to deal with this idea that we have to be a church family that is not just content with where we are, but that is making room and creating space for other people to be here who are not here yet. And also that it can't just be something that we do on Sundays from 10:30 to 11:30 once a week. So, the reason this matters so much, and I don't want to try to oversell this, but man, it's easy to undersell. The reason this matters so much is, let's circle back to the office episode, to the dinner party episode. When you're in a situation where you know you don't belong, you're probably never going to go back. You've been in those situations. You've been somewhere at some point in time that was like, this is not my zone. I don't fit in. I'm not a part of the inside crew. Other people enjoy this. I don't. I'm not coming back. I remember my freshman year of high school. I went to a dance, the first dance of freshman year of high school. I don't know the theme. It was probably the homecoming dance. I don't really know. Went to it. The entire time I thought, this is the dumbest thing I've ever been to in my whole life. Now, most people like to dance. I don't understand it. My body doesn't know what to do. The whole thing just feels awkward and weird. Like there's nothing in me that understands it, that knows how to do it. And so I went to one dance my freshman year of high school and went, I'm never going back to a dance. And I never did. I never went to a single dance the rest of high school. Into college, I did end up going to a couple things in college. When Vanessa and I do, one of the parts of my job is that I get to perform wedding ceremonies for people, and that's great, except for the dancing at the end. So Vanessa always goes with me to those kind of things, and she knows I don't dance. So I just did Mike and Maddie's wedding a few weeks ago, and she did her normal thing. We got there and we're hanging out, and the dancing's about to start, and she looks at me and she goes, 1. I was like, yep, 1. And so the dancing started, and I danced with her for 1 song, and that was that. And I sat there like a lump on a log the rest of the time. Now, that environment is an environment that I just don't understand, I don't feel comfortable in. But it's a whole different thing when we go into a situation where the people that are with us make us feel as if we don't belong. It's a whole different thing when the people in that situation, not the circumstances of the situation, but the people in the situation make it feel like we don't belong there. That's a different thing entirely. In the Office episode, that's what's so painful. It's not so much that the other couples don't belong. It's that the situation in the home of the boss is so messed up, so weird, so unhealthy. They're just like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? And they don't know how to, the couple at the home, they don't know how to make everybody feel welcome. And you just know, the entire episode, you know, well, this is never going to happen again. It will never happen. The idea that we're going to cover today is so crucial. It's so important because if we get this wrong, and every church at certain points in time in their history gets this wrong. If we get it wrong, a couple really critical things will happen that are bad. The first is when people walk through our doors that are not yet a part of our church family, they will know they're not a part of our church family. They will feel like they can't belong, and they will never step foot in this building again. And that can't ever happen. It can't. It can't. And it can't because a church is supposed to be a beacon of light into a dark world. It's supposed to be a hospital for broken people. It's supposed to be a place where people who are hurting can find healing, and where people who are lost can find forgiveness and mercy and grace. And how can we do those things if people who aren't a part of our church family don't feel like they can ever be a part of our church family? And so it's critical that we get this right for that reason. But the other reason that it's critical is it's harder to detect. It's harder to identify. It can kind of weave its way amidst a church, and before you even realize it, it can just wreak havoc and destruction on a scale that truly you kind of can't imagine. And some of you have experienced it, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Others of you haven't, and it's going to feel like I'm making a big deal out of something that's nothing, but it is, honest to goodness, a huge deal. If we don't get this right, the other thing that will happen is that at some point in time, Satan will weasel his way in between relationships. And he'll weasel his way in between relationships that are critical to the health of the church. And he'll start to mess up friendships, and he'll start to divide people one from another, and he'll start to just create all this doubt in people's minds about whether or not we care for one another. And before you know it, you end up with church splits and all kind of nasty stuff. And when you look at it in the rear view, you go, where did all this start? It always starts when people get this idea wrong. Always. In fact, some of what we're going to talk about in the coming weeks, we're going to deal with some tough stuff in the coming weeks. We're going to talk about forgiveness and things like that. Like, the reason why forgiveness matters is because sometimes we don't do this part very well. So, again, I don't want to oversell it, but man, it's easy to undersell too, because this is going to seem like a simple, easy truth. But if we get it wrong, the consequences can be devastating. So, let's jump right in. I'm going to read 5 passages. I'm just going to kind of buzz through them quick to show you some places where this idea is. 2 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 12. Paul says this: greet one another with a holy kiss. It's kind of a weird verse. Greet one another with a holy kiss. There's actually 4 more verses that are almost verbatim this exact same thing, talking about kissing one another. So, to be clear, not literal. This is not we don't have to kiss each other, okay? In a modern context, this might look something like fist bumping at the front doors, okay? Giving a genuine warm hug to someone at the front doors. Culturally, kissing one another on the cheek made absolute sense 2,000 years ago. It was a normal way of greeting people. Today, not as much. So let's not start this, okay? We talked a moment ago about the devastating consequences of making people feel like they're not welcome. Well, you can also make people feel like they're too welcome, if you know what I mean, all right? So we're not going to start kissing each other. But the idea is simply what Paul is identifying is when you greet one another, you need to greet each other with warmth and with intimacy. With warmth and with intimacy. He says it in multiple letters. This is a big deal to Paul, actually. Greet one another with a holy kiss. Number 2, Romans 15. Accept one another then, just as Christ accepted you in order to bring praise to God. Accept one another. Let's break that down very, very briefly. He said, just as Christ did. Well, how did Christ accept us? The way that Christ accepted us biblically is that while we were sinners, while we were separated from God because of the choices in our lives, the selfishness in our hearts, while we were separated, he came to earth and died for us to make a way for us to enter into eternity with God, which is to say, to make space in his home for us. While we were living lives that were totally separated from God, we had no way to get back, Jesus gave up his life so that we could be at home with him, so that we could sit in his living room, so that we could hang out in the kitchen and talk, so that we could be in his home. That's how he accepted us, not expecting anything in return other than faith and trust in him. That's how he accepted us. Paul says, accept one another then, just as Christ accepted you. Well, how did Christ accept you? Again, he looked past all the things. We covered bearing with and love and humility. And he looked past the stuff and said, you're welcome with me. You don't have to, it's your choice, but you're welcome with me. No strings attached, no holds barred. You're welcome with me. These are all about the importance of internal warmth and acceptance. Jesus, through the cross, has literally created space for us in his home. This speaks to the first reality that I talked about a few minutes ago. If we get this wrong, if we can't do something as simple as greet one another with genuine warmth and an acceptance, if we can't approach one another with a level of acceptance in our hearts, in the way that Christ accepted us, there will come a point in time when Satan will begin to divide. It starts with accepting, with greeting, not with kissing, but with being warm and intimate, truly warm and intimate with one another. I actually heard an interaction this morning that I won't draw attention to the people because I didn't ask permission to share the story, but I actually witnessed an interaction this morning that I was really, really glad for. There was somebody who came up to the doors and people were greeting and said, hey, how's it going? Good to see you today. Hey, how you doing? And they said, well, I'm not going to lie. I'm not good, but I'm here and I'm glad to be here. I was like, that's what it's all about. Like, you don't have to share the ins and outs. You don't have to share all the details, but like there's an intimacy. There's a warmth in that. Man, how do we get through our stuff if we can't accept each other exactly where we are? No strings attached. Accept one another then. These are about warmth. They're about the internal family. But there's a second angle that matters that I mentioned. There's that angle of like, we have to be able to create space for people who aren't here yet. Well, there's several places where this gets dealt with. Paul in the book of Romans says this, love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another. There's our one another word, in love. There's our foundation. Honor one another above yourselves. Hey, we read this verse a few weeks ago. Remember I said it's all connected. Honor one another above yourselves. Then he says, never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Like, be passionate about your faith. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. And then he finishes it up and says, practice hospitality, which just seems kind of odd. Contextually, it kind of makes sense, but it's also sort of out of left field. Practice hospitality. In the book of 1 Peter, the Apostle Peter writes this, offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. That's a fun addition. I'm not going to spend any time there, but based on the chuckles, I understand that some of you get there's a little bit of irony in that. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. In the book of Hebrews, the writer of Hebrews writes this, keep on loving one another as brothers and sisters. Well, that sure sounds like the theme of this series. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels. without even knowing it. That's an interesting verse that I could spend quite a bit of time on, but we're not going to. The point is, what the writer of Hebrews is saying is you don't actually even know the people that you're entertaining sometimes. Sometimes there's more going on than meets the eye. Now, here's why I read these verses. Because when I say the word hospitality, my guess is most of us have some sort of an image in mind, and it may not be exactly the same, but it probably revolves around people we know. The word in the Greek that is used for hospitality in all three of these examples is actually a word that does not indicate relationships between people that are familiar with one another. It indicates relationships with people who do not know one another. The writer of Hebrews says it explicitly, offer hospitality to strangers. Paul and Peter don't explicitly say it in English, but in Greek they do. The word hospitality literally means make space for the travelers, the wanderers, those who are passing through town, the strangers, to have a warm place to lay their heads and a warm meal to fill their bellies. For strangers, for people you don't know, open your homes to them. So here's the thing. All of this together, there's most of you know about me. I'm wired very big picture. I like to look at connection points, and I like to try to connect these dots, and they're not always the most obvious. And in this case, as I was kind of researching and digging into what one another topics to consider, this one initially wasn't even on my list because it's somewhat hidden. I mean, it's there, but it's not like explicit. It's a little bit hard to flesh out. But the reality is having warmth and intimacy toward our brothers and sisters and being willing to open our doors to those who are not yet a part of the family is a critical concept. And it's a critical concept because it is how God's family grows in both numbers and in relationship. In other words, God's family is formed and expanded through hospitality. God's family is formed and expanded through hospitality, through greeting one another, through accepting one another, through being hospitable toward one another. This is how God's family is formed and expanded. And I mean, it makes sense. This is how friend groups form and expand. Like nobody's friends, well, I shouldn't say nobody. Most people are not friends with people who are not nice to them, who aren't warm toward them, who don't offer some level of intimacy, who are always on the surface level. You don't tend to grow in your relationship with those people over time. There have to be steps taken toward depth, toward intimacy. If there's somebody who never says hello to you, you're probably not going to spend a lot of time with them. This is foundational to human relationships, and it's critical inside the church, which is why it's something that is, although kind of just glossed over in some ways, I think it's glossed over because it's like, well, yeah, you have to do this stuff. And yet as people, we don't always do this stuff. As people, sometimes it's easy to walk in and out of a room and maybe greet people, but there's like nothing underneath it. You know what I mean? Hey, how you doing? But I don't mean it. Hey, you doing okay? But like I'm not really listening. And then when we answer saying, oh, I'm good, when I'm not. Saying, well, yeah, this is especially true in a lot of church circles. Like we aren't in the South, and so this doesn't happen as much, but it always makes me laugh when I go to Southern churches because you hear all the time like, well, praise the Lord, I'm doing great. You know? Like, but are you? Are you really? Because a lot of times we aren't. And are we willing to be open? Are we willing to be intimate? And then moreover, are we willing to offer that openness and a place at the table to make room for people that aren't here yet? Now, City North, we've always done a pretty good job of being open-handed and recognizing that this is not a place that we can just, hold for ourselves and not be welcoming and opening to other people. But the truth is, in practice, we don't always get it right. So I've told you that throughout this series, I'm going to step on toes some. And there might be some toe stepping about to happen. If you're so focused on Sunday mornings on your relationships with the people already know that you don't speak to anybody new, you're getting this wrong. If you're so focused on building the relationships with the people you already love that you aren't building any new relationships, you might be creating an environment where people don't want to come back. Not because you aren't kind, you aren't friendly. You guys are the kindest people I know. But they don't. They don't know it yet. All they know is they show up in a room and go, well, I'm not a part of the inside club. I'm not a part of the inner circle. Do I really have a place here? It doesn't seem like it. Please don't misunderstand. What I'm not saying is don't build relationships with each other. Greet one another with a holy kiss, you know? Like, just kidding, that was a joke. Don't greet each other with a holy kiss. We got to greet one another. We got to be warm toward one another. We got to be welcoming and intimate toward one another. Absolutely. But if we're doing that to the exclusion of the strangers, then we're not doing it right at all. God's family is formed and formed and expanded through hospitality. This is a powerful cycle that Jesus modeled. When we welcome strangers, we create friends. As we greet friends, we become family. And as we become family, if we do it right, we create space for new strangers. Those strangers then become friends who become family, and then friends and strangers, friends, family. It's a powerful cycle. It is how the early church was formed. It is how Jesus called his disciples. And what you notice is that when Jesus goes to invite his disciples to follow him, he invites them to follow him, and then he spends time teaching them and training them and coaching them. And what are his departing words? Go and make more. Strangers become friends, and friends become family, and family welcomes strangers. And when we do it right, it means both that we are filling the seats and leaving seats open around our metaphorical dinner table. I remember in the early days of the church, like the earliest days, even before we had planted, Vanessa and I knew that God had asked us to start a church. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know where to go. We didn't know how to do any of this. And so we just found church planting organizations. And there was one in particular that we found, and we went to a training that they had. And I remember going to this training, and we both were overwhelmed with a sense that, like, wow, these people really see us. Like they really see us. And it's hard to even put into words. It was in all these ways, big and small, that it just felt like they had prepared for us, that it was really amazing. And it was like, well, we want to be with them, because that's what we want for people. A lot of you probably don't know this, but maybe you've been in our bathrooms before and wondered, like, why is there deodorant in here? Well, there's deodorant for the case when on the Sunday morning, maybe somebody forgot theirs. And we wanted them to know that, like, hey, we've considered you. We've thought about you. Is that a little bit silly? Maybe. We made a big deal about this early on as a church and did a really great job of welcoming people. And again, we've done a good job as a church in general, but that's why, like, there's even methodological things that we've done over the years that a lot of people don't know why, but that's why. When I preach, when I talk about, like, when I give context for the people that I reference, I do that because I assume that there might be somebody in the room who doesn't know who that person is. And I want to make sure they know that they can belong here. This is crucial. This is why having a greeting team matters so much. Like, our greeters, you guys are some of the best people in our church. Why? Because every single person, when they walk through those doors, if they don't feel like they matter, they'll decide they never are coming back before they even walk in this room. We'll never get to the music. We'll never get to the preaching. They're going to decide before they get in this room if they're ever coming back or not. Our greeters are the front line for this. For each of us, it's nice to walk up to the doors every Sunday and see somebody that you know cares about you giving you a high five, isn't it? Like it encourages your soul from the jump. When we welcome one another, when we get this right, it creates so much health. And it enables us to continue to build off the strength of encouragement that we talked about last week. Now, what do we do with it? Well, obviously, we do what we do here. That's part of it. But that's the obvious part. We continue to greet well, and listen, to be clear, whether or not you're a greeter on a Sunday morning, if you're a part of this family, you are a greeter. Like, you might not be scheduled, you might not be on the greeting team, but if you're a part of our family, you are a greeter every Sunday. Your demeanor, your disposition toward people who aren't a part of the family yet, it matters. So what we do here counts, but there's another aspect of this that I want to talk about, an aspect of it that sort of takes this idea and pumps it into overdrive and can create incredible, incredible health and strength in a church. In the book of Acts, chapter 2, there's this section where it describes the power and the momentum of the earliest iterations of church. The earliest iterations of the Jesus movement, what they called at the time the way. And I've read this many times over the years, but we're going to go back to it because it's important. Acts chapter 2, starting in verse 46, says this. This is again describing what they did, the earliest Christians. Every day, it says, they, the Christians, they continued to meet together in the temple courts. You can think of that like a church service. We don't meet in a temple, we meet in a church building, but that's the idea. They met, they gathered for public or for corporate collective worship. So every day they did that. They broke bread in their homes, and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. They gathered in the temple courts, and they worshiped. And they broke bread, not in the temple courts, in their homes. Now, it doesn't say daily, but it's implied. We live in a culture that is busy. We live in a culture that is so full of stuff. We live in a culture in a time where there's a million things to do all the time. We don't live. The reality is life back then would have been a whole lot harder in many ways, but in some ways it would have been a whole lot easier. One of those would have been relationships. They just weren't as complex. People didn't have the time to sit around and fuss about who's mad at who. And I'm not, listen, there were issues in relationships. There have always been issues in relationships. But for the most part, you worked your job, which you probably worked very close to your home, and the other people worked their jobs, which they probably worked close to or even maybe in their homes, and you saw your neighbors all the time, and you knew one another. It's like you just did. You interacted with people all the time. The truth is today, most of us, we drive into our jobs. A lot of the people we work with probably live in very different areas. Many of us, we don't really even know our neighbors, or we don't even want to live in neighborhoods. It's very different. It's not good or bad, it's just different. But here's the reality. What we see in the early church is that there was momentum and there was movement. Why? Because these people were together. They were together and they were united, and within it, they spent all this time together, and it was, I mean, you've been around people who are just like, they're so tight-knit, you're like, man, I don't know what they have, but like, I'd like some of that. That's what we see. And people were constantly coming to know the Lord through it. And how did it happen? Because they worshiped together. It was a two-part formula. They worshiped together. We talked last week about the importance of meeting together. They worshiped together, and they broke bread in their homes. When's the last time you had somebody around your table? Somebody that you don't know very well. Somebody that the Lord put on your heart. For some of us, the answer is never. For some of us, maybe we've had people around our table who are people we already knew relatively well or something like that. But again, I want to be specific. When's the last time you had somebody around your table that the Lord said to bring around your table? That God said, I want you to invite them into your home. See, for a lot of us, I don't even think that we have space in our hearts right now. And please don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to, I warned you that there was going to be some toe stepping. I'm not trying to say that you should have known all along and been doing that. The truth is, culturally, this is something that we've lost. But we never should have. We never should have. Sharing a meal around a table in a home is one of the most intimate things you can do. There are more intimate things. It's one of the most intimate things that you can do. If you've ever experienced that before, and hopefully you all have at some point or another, you know that once you did and it went well, wasn't a dinner party from the office situation. Once it went well, the next time you saw those people, there was a level of connection there that's very different than before. Sharing a meal around a table is one of the most intimate things you can do. Within a church context, sharing a meal around a table is one of the most important things that we can do for each other. Now, Vanessa and I at times in our marriage have done a really great job of this. And to be really blunt, Vanessa's the driver of 100% of it. She's an extrovert, I'm an introvert. I'm peopled out most of the time. She's never peopled out. So it's usually her driving that. We've done it well in seasons. We've done it poorly in other seasons. It's always been productive and good. But the reality is that we don't do this well as a church. We just don't. Because we don't do this well as a culture. And so we've lost sight of the importance of it. This is one of the most important things that I learned from my grandparents in particular growing up. My Grammy was one of the most hospitable people that I've ever known in my life. I'll never forget when I moved to Winfield, West Virginia for my first job out of college as a youth pastor. I thought at one point my Grammy was going to drive to West Virginia to wring some necks. And the reason is because within the first couple months of me being there, nobody invited me into their home. I was this young youth pastor, 22 years old from Columbus, and I was in this new state, and there was one family that invited me into their home. The family of, at the time, my best friend, now my wife, Vanessa. Other than that, no families in the church invited me into their home. I thought my Grammy was going to come to the church and have a come to Jesus meeting with the entire. She was so angry because she couldn't wrap her head around how it was possible that somebody could not do that. For those of you that knew my dad, that's my dad's mom. And so it's no wonder that my dad was the way that he was. It's critical, it's crucial. It's the way you build strength. It's the way you build warmth as you're building strength. One more quick anecdote and then I'm going to get to the end of this. The church I grew up in was a strong church. It was not a perfect church. I've shared about it over the years, but it was a strong church. The church I grew up in is in many ways responsible today for the love that I have for the local church. The ability for me to recognize that a local church can be flawed, but be good. The ability I have to recognize that people inside of a church can do hurtful things. Christian people can do hurtful things, but the church as a whole is sacred and good. I've been able to hold on to that because of the church I grew up in. A few years ago, my parents were telling me some stories of the early days of the church. I shouldn't say the early days when they were at that church. See, when my parents graduated from college in 1981-ish, they moved to Columbus and they took jobs. And when they moved, they found a little church nearby to them, a Nazarene church, because they had both grown up Nazarene. And they began to attend and they got invested there. And they were at that church from 1981 until 2016 when City North launched. They never left. They never went to another church. They never even thought about it. Well, before I was born, there was a pastor there who did a really interesting thing. You know, these are the days of Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night church, right? So every Sunday night, this pastor would get up, he'd do his sermon, and then at the end of the night, what he would say is some version of, hey, before you leave tonight, find somebody to invite to come home with you. Find a family to invite home with you. And I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, well, we don't have food prepared. We don't have anything planned. He would say, that's okay. You have popcorn and water, and that's all you need. And what my parents relayed to me was that they built relationships with people around tables with popcorn and water that are relationships that to this day, those people would show up for me if I were to call them. For me. Not just for my parents. For me. When my dad died and I stood on this stage and I preached his funeral, there were so many people there that day who were the people that my parents shared popcorn and water around tables with in 1981, 1982, 1983, 1984. There are people who love my family, not because of anything that my parents offered them, but because they built warmth and care around tables of popcorn and water. So how do we do this as a church family? We share tables, maybe with popcorn and water. My wife would never in a million years accept that. She has to cook a full meal. That's the way she is. But that's not what has to happen. What do we need to do to get this right? We need to make room. If you want to begin to help our church take significant steps toward health and growth, make room around your table this week. Make room around your table this week. Dave, if you'll pull that slide for me, please. Make room around your table this week. You can go get coffee, that's fine. You can go take somebody out to dinner at a restaurant, that's fine. It's still different. There's something different when you share a table in a home. In the earliest days of City North, there was significant strength and warmth that was built around tables in homes. We didn't have a building to gather in. We had to meet in homes. And it changed us fundamentally. Make room around your table this week. Ask the Lord, who do you want me to invite? Who do you want me to make room for? probably what the Lord's gonna do is say somebody to you that you don't know very well, and that might scare you. That's okay. You just don't know them well yet. Some of you are like, oh my gosh, are you serious right now? I come here to get encouraged. I don't have room in my life for more people. No, you do. You do. That doesn't mean it's easy, but you do. And I know you do because God wouldn't have called us to behave this way if you didn't. God wouldn't have called us to act this way toward one another, to welcome each other around tables if we were capable of reaching actual relational fullness. Now, maybe what it is that you have people in your life that are sucking your energy. Maybe there's people in your life who are not giving you life. Maybe there's people who you are struggling with. And maybe the person you invite around your table will be someone who takes a load off. Maybe it'll be like the dinner party episode of The Office and you never have them back. That's okay too. You'll learn some things about who you're really gonna be friends with. One time isn't gonna kill you. But maybe one time we'll begin to make a lifelong friendship that one day, 20, 30, 40 years from now, you'll still know they'd show up for me. Maybe 20, 30, 40 years from now, your kids will know there are people that love my parents and that love me because of the popcorn and water they shared around their tables. I'm telling you right now, I have 20 names in my phone of people that I haven't seen in 15 or 20 years that I could call this instant, and if I said I was in trouble, they would show up. Because they love me, and they love my family. And we built it, they built it, I wasn't a part of it. They built it around tables of popcorn and water. So let's be people who welcome one another, who greet one another, not with a holy kiss, because that's weird, but with warmth and with intimacy. Let's be people who welcome the strangers into our midst, who have made room purposefully. But beyond that, let's be people who take what we have here into our homes and share tables together so that our kids can tell that story one day too. Let's pray.